Welcome back to my experiment in how do you affect size collective teacher efficacy, where I work through how I'm tweaking the guided language acquisition development techniques to work in the secondary classroom. Today I'm going to talk about the process grid. Now, everything in GLAD starts with the process grid. This is a special grid you're going to make by yourself, or better yet, with your colleagues, because it's going to be a big undertaking. Before you do anything in the classroom, before you even tell the students what you're doing, before you introduce any concepts, you have already made this process grid behind the scenes. Everything's going to be based around the process grid. You're going to pick it apart in front of your students. You're going to have your students pick it apart. You're going to reassemble it in front of your students. You're going to have your students reassemble it. Everything stems from the process grid. When you get lost, and yes, you're going to get lost, you're going to refer back to your process grid. At the end of the unit, in a kind of a circle of life kind of way, you're suddenly going to look up and say, oh, what do you know? We just reinvented the process grid that I secretly made before this whole thing began. And it's kind of amazing to do it that way. But it is a lot of work up front. So I sat down with a couple of colleagues, and there are 4 of us who teach Spanish in my school district. There's only I teach French, only I teach Japanese, so I can kind of do whatever the heck I feel like with those languages. But with Spanish, we all are on the same page. And I sat down with a couple of my colleagues, and we said, hey, you know what? We use a lot of music in the classroom because music is repetition. And also music trivia is kind of fun. So we use a lot of music in the classroom. Let's put together a process grid for all of our favorite songs and our favorite performers. And so we sat down one afternoon, and oh my gosh, this was so much work just to do this much, even though these are all people that we know and love, and we talk about them all the time, and we use their songs all the time. So here's the problem. I teach Español Uno. I teach Spanish 1. And my Spanish 1 students are not going to have the vocabulary to understand that Mark Antony used to be married to Jennifer Lopez, and Oscar de Leon is suffering from alopecia, but he's got this really rockin' cello that he dances around with, and nobody's going to understand any of that stuff. It's just inaccessible. So I sat down again and thought about it with colleagues again, and we're all using Auténtico by Savis, and it's got its pluses and minuses, but since we're all on the same page, literally, we said, let's look at this. Let's just open this book and see what it is we want our students to know. And so we decided we were going to start thinking, instead of a process grid, we were going to think in terms of a skill grid, okay? And we decided that the earliest we could really start any severe GLAD techniques would be Capítulo 2A, Chapter 2A, because then the students will have enough of a foundation that we can really begin doing this, because, of course, the whole goal is entirely in the target language, right? So 2A is talking about La Escuela and all your classes, okay? And so we sat down, we said, it's got to be skill. Now, notice there's nothing filled in here. Okay, we didn't fill in anything because we're going to have our students fill in this part. This is going to make everything much more relevant to the students. It helps the students commit things to their long-term memory better. So we don't ever fill this part in. We just fill this and this in. And let's look at that in a little more detail, okay? So you'll notice this left-hand side. This left-hand side is going to eventually become the GOIC. And I didn't space my thing very well today. The GOIC is the graphic organizer input chart. And that's another technique of GLAD, and I'll talk about that in the next video. But right now, all you need to know is that these are our classes that you could possibly have in school. That's going to become the GOIC. Okay? The top row is going to become the pictorial input chart, also abbreviated to PIC. Okay? So this, let me go over this in more detail, what we broke this down to. Okay, so first of all, we've got a translation or picture that's straight from the Freire diagrams we've been doing, or the term information picture charts we've been doing. Okay, in the first chapter, we learned gustar. Okay, so why can't we call back to that now? We don't have to pretend like, hey, that chapter's done, you've been tested on it, let's never speak of it again. We could be building on that skill, right? So the students can say, I like math, I don't like math. Hey, you know what? They can even say, I like it, the maths are pleasing to me, and we can start having them do the plural, gustan, okay? I like lunch, I don't like lunch. I like Spanish, I don't like Spanish. Whatever, it's now suddenly relevant to them, okay? Como es, we did that in Capítulo 1B, Chapter 1B. We were describing ourselves. We were saying, soy inteligente. Why can't we apply that to classes now? Why can't we start describing the classes using those same words? Okay, they were working on gender, knowing that adjectives describe nouns, and so the adjective has to describe if the noun is masculine or feminine, or if the noun is singular or plural. We can start doing that with the classes too. En que hora, this is new information introduced this chapter. This is going to be the ordinal numbers. Is it first period, second period, third period, whatever? There we go. Here, I'll move it so you can see. That's new information, so they should be applying that here. Cuando, in the very beginning of the book, there's a para empezar section before you begin, where we teach the students how to tell time. Let's call back to that. They can say not only it's first period, but it's 7:36 a.m. Why not? And then students are working on AR verbs at this point. I already front load that, but let's really pound it in. What do you need for that class? And the book separates school supplies across a couple of chapters. Because I really work on mnemonics, and I figure, we got to encode this in your brain in the same area. If you're learning pencil today, there's no reason why you shouldn't learn paper today also. There's no reason why you shouldn't learn all these things that go together. So all the school supplies I teach all at the same time, the very first week of class. And so now the students can say, hey, for math class, I need a calculator and a pencil and an eraser. And for Spanish class, I need an eraser. Erasers are very important, right? We're going to make mistakes and have to redo it. So one thing I really love about doing this is that suddenly everything is accessible to my students. And the students are the ones creating the content. So that makes it a snap, first of all, for me to make the process grids. You remember the earlier process grid, we had to sit down and think about every single thing that was going to go here. Here, the students are making this very relevant to themselves. This is all exactly what they want to say about all these subjects. This is the truth. Okay, there's nothing that they're memorizing that they don't care to memorize. It's all stuff that is important to the core of their very being itself, right? So here's some examples. All right, so let's just randomly grab one of these. All right, so student here had in this column, what do you need? They wrote, I need a computer for technology class, for IT class. Okay, perfect. All right, for here, a student wrote, art is fun. Yeah, that's great. They're doing all those I statements they need to do. Here, this student combined two things. They said in first period, I have PE at move the wrong thing at 7:30. Okay, so those are those two blue ones, and then this one. And here the student just said, I like civics. So everyone is saying something very, very relevant to themselves. Now, I do teach French 2 and 3, and so for them, I decided I was going to experiment with more advanced techniques of GLAD. And so it's been a long time of pandemic and post-pandemic protocols, but now I can finally get back to playing restaurant. I really like project-based activities, and so I prepare my students to order food in a restaurant. They have to order completely in French, and they have to sustain a conversation, and they have to ask the waiter for recommendations, and they have to pay the bill, and they have to talk to all their table mates in French for the whole period, and it is super fun. So what I did for that, and that took me a long time to sit down and write the process grid, but along the top, well, first of all, the process grid is about where do you find food? Where do you eat food? All right, so the places, the grocery store, Okay. A restaurant, your own kitchen, cooking for yourself, right? Open air market, coffee shop, and then we could talk about coffee culture in France. A cheese shop, very important to know for French. A butcher or delicatessen, also bakery. Have to talk about bread in France, very important. And the school cafeteria, I wasn't expecting to be their favorite, but basically for everything else, I used free clip art. But for the school cafeteria, I just went around with my camera and took pictures of things they saw, and suddenly I should have known it. I should have known that the relevance was going to make that the most exciting part. And so now I have to go around with my camera and do all these other things because they just loved seeing places that they recognized, and they love talking about what they do. Okay, so this is the left-hand column. This is what's going to become the GOIC in our next episode. And on the top, I decided here's the people that you're going to see in the grocery store. Here's the people that you're going to see in a restaurant. Here's the people that you're going to see in your own kitchen. So that I got to talk about family again, call back to that. The people that you're going to see in the open air market. And yeah, I added dogs too, people. Okay, and the items, there's a cash register here. There's silverware here and here. There's bags that you have to bring here and at the grocery store, and there's a coffee cup at the coffee shop, and etc. And the types of food you see at each of these places, where they're located, okay, and then locations within the store, within the place also. Okay, so not only the grocery store is down the block to the left, but also there's aisles, and there's food in the aisles, on the shelf, those kind of locations. There's people standing behind the counter. There's you getting the basket from in front of the counter. So those locations within also. And then the verbs, all the verbs, the actions that you're going to do in these places. Okay, so you're going to eat, you're going to pay, you're going to cook, you're going to shop, you're going to talk, you're going to listen to music in the open air market, you're going to play with dogs, you're going to talk to your friends, you're going to greet the teachers, whatever verbs we needed for that. Okay. All right. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about the graphic organizer input chart, which was that left-hand column of the process grid. Thank you for joining me.